Now we're going to move over to numeracy and mathematics 3. And here we are going to look at the next unit. First, let's look at the outcomes of learning for Unit 3. Now, the first thing is that at the end of this lesson, students should be able to develop learners' ability to identify features, classify objects accordingly. You must help the learner to develop activities that will help learners to identify a group or to sort object according to the following. It must be according to the size. You must be able to help and assist learners to sort object, for example, from big to small to the smallest. That is according to size. When you talk about size, we more talk about big, small, smallest. And then according to color, you need to help the learners group or sort out object according to their color. For example, pink, all the pink objects, you put them in one box. The red ones in one box, yellow one in one box, and the white one, you put it somewhere there. So that is now the outcomes of this module. You must also help the learners to identify objects according to shapes. For example, you have a lot of objects together. The learners must only extract the round objects, or the squared, or the oval, or the triangle, or the round object. Or we already talked about the round object, or the circular object, or something. So those are the things that we need that we're gonna learn in this one. Now, you also have to help the materials, metal, plastic, wood, and fiber. They must be able to sort out or group object according to metals on one side, all those ones that are plastic, put it on this side, all the wooden toys must put on the other side, and the fibers and so on, so that the learners can know the difference between a metal, a plastic, a wood, and a fiber. Now, patterns. You must also teach your learners to master pattern. For example, this pattern is zigzag, these ones are stripes, and round circles, for example. Here, I wanted to show you here that when you're having this type of questions, for example, where they are asking you, you have patterns like this one. For example, you have a zigzag pattern like this. And then you have another pattern which is just dots. And then you have another pattern which is, for example, you have two lines there, and then in these lines you have stripes like this. So this is also a different pattern. Now you need to learn the learners to say that, or to see that this pattern is different from the other one. Or you have another pattern where you have just round objects, round circles like this. Those are different patterns when you look at them. So this one is a zigzag, this one is dots, this one is stripes. For example, this one is stripes, and this one is circles. So the learners must be able to see that when they see this pattern, they must see that it is different from the dots, and it's different from the stripes, and it's different from the circles. That is very, very critical. And then texture, you must also let the learner feel objects. For example, when you talk about texture, it's more about feeling the object. Is it rough? Is it smooth? Is it hard? Is it soft? Is it wet? Or is it dry? Those are the texture that you also need to learn. And when you are teaching the learner these things, you must give them the objects for them to feel. Which one is hard? For example, you give them a hard material, a metal, and then you give them a soft material, maybe a toilet paper, soft one or whatever. And then you give them hard materials or rough materials like stones, which is having a lot of sharp corners, sharp objects, sharp edges, and so on. Or you give them something that is wet, and they must distinguish between the wet one and the dry one. So that is texture. And you need to teach them these things. The functions, Then you have to teach them, for example, the functions of tools. Some tools, for example, is to fix cars. You need a screwdriver, the spanner, and those things are for fixing cars. You use them in a garage. There are other tools, for example, openers that you use in the kitchen, or knives and forks. Those are cutleries in your kitchen. And then there is other tools that you use in the toilet. For example, you have things like a toilet paper, a towel, soap, and toothbrush, toothpaste. Those are things that you use in the toilet as a toiletry, for example. Now, you need to help the learners to understand the grouping of these objects, whether the object is grouped according to cutleries, or is it grouped according to the functions of the where you use it, in the toilet, or do you use it in the kitchen, or do you use it in a garage, or do you use it to play with, and so on. So many tools are having different functions. In other words, you can use it for various different things as they are being used or made to do. Now, association, things are used together, e.g. shoes and clothes, books and pens, knives and fork. So association, you use these things together to accomplish something. For example, if you're having shoes and clothes, that's what you wear. You can't just wear clothes and you are walking around in the street without shoes. You need shoes. So the two are associated together. You can also not just have books and you don't have a pen, because you need a pen to write in the book. And also you cannot just have knives and you don't have fork. How will you eat in your kitchen? You need a knife and a fork. So there is an association there. These two works together. So when we talk about association, is how things work together, how things cooperate with one another. Now, class names, different objects to be classified as cloth. So all your trousers, your skirts, your t-shirts, your whatever is called cloth. That is a class name. Class name, cloth. And then you have things like food. If I put there, I put a pen, an apple, spinach, and maybe shoes. Now I say, please pick up the food. Then you know that you're only going to pick up the apple, because that's the one that is classified as food. Then there is drinks, there is veggies, there is fruits, there is others. So when you talk about class names, we talk about things that are similar in terms of function. If you have fruits, all of them, they are all fruits. But some of the fruits are vegetables, some are just fruits. Then you have drinks, some are soft drinks, some are alcoholic drinks, some are juices, some are others, wine and so on. So those things are, although they are all drinks, they are in different class or in different categories, but they are all in one class. So food the same, whether you have meat, or you have porridge, or you have mahangu, or you have what, they are all called meat. They are all called food, sorry. They are all called food. So it's something that we eat, and that is their class. Their class is classified as food. Others are classified as drinks. Others are classified as veggies. That is when we talk about class name. Common features. For example, birds that can fly and birds that cannot fly. So they are all birds, but not all birds can fly. For example, they are all food. Some food you just eat them like that. Some food you need to cook to eat them. But they are all food. So the common features, that's what we are talking about. Water animals and land animals. For example, plastic cups and metal cup. They are all cups, but some are made out of plastic, some are made out of metal. Water animals and land animals. Some animals stay in water, some animals stay on land, but they are all animals. So they are just classified according to their common features. So those that are staying in water, we call them sea animals. Those that are not able to stay in water, we call it land animals. Some animals are domestic, other animals are wild animals. They don't stay among people. Domestic animals usually are things like dog, cats, and stuff like that. They stay with people. But the wild animals, they stay in the wild. When they see you, they run away. Higher level of classification. Now, there is other higher level of classification that you need to teach your learners. Multiple classification is when a learner gets different shapes, size, and colors, and they should sort them out. You mix them all. There is yellow, pink, what, and then there is blue, there is a small, big, there is rectangle, there is squares, there is what, and then all these things are in one box, and you ask the learner, please group all the yellow things together. So he can group them whether they are the same size or not the same sizes, or what, as long as they are yellow, he grouped them in one group. Or you can say those ones who are the same size, group them together. So whether the thing is red or pink or what, as long as they are the same size, he or she must group them together. And then it goes on that shapes and color and so on. So those are the multiple classification. The other classification, you simply put round objects with squares and you ask them to sort out. But here you put round object, squares, soft object, hard object, what, and they must sort out. That is multiple classification. Class classification is sorting animals according to where they live. E.g., you put water animals together, you put land animals on another part, and you put domestic and wild animals, or wild animals in another one. In other words, you can give these learners toys or pictures, and they can say which one is a water animal. Then they can say the fish and the seals and all these ones, they put it as water animals. And then they can have the kutu and the whatever, the oryx, springboks and so on as wild animals. They are on land and so on. And you can help them also to maybe divide between domestic and wild animals. Those domestic and wild animals, they are all land animals, but they have to be divided in subcategories, and that is now class classification. Class classification is that you put animals or objects that are doing the same thing or that are having some similarity in one group. That is what we call class classification. Now, common features, grouping things that do similar tasks. That is common features. Grouping things that do similar tasks. For example, cutlery. The reason why we have cutleries is for us to be able to use it in the kitchen, either to cook or to eat or to cut or to whatever that you are using for that one. Now, form constancy. Students should be able to develop activity that will help learners develop their form constancy. As a teacher, you should have activities that will help your learner to master form constancy. Shapes remain the same regardless of the size, the color, and the surrounding. That is when we talk about form constancy. In other words, whether you have a triangle and it's pink, the other one is yellow, it is still the same it's still the same form or shape, which is called a triangle. Whether the one triangle is small, the other one is big, they are all triangles. That is when we talk about form constancy. And then the other one is mix various objects and request students to sort them out according to their shapes, regardless of their color. Learners' ability to sort out triangle, squares, or circle, regardless of their size, should be developed and applied to their ability to distinguish numbers from alphabetic letters, or even numbers from odd numbers, or capital letters from lowercase numbers. This is how you will teach your learners. You can either use things like triangles and squares. You mix them together. and you tell them that they must look at this triangle and these squares in this box and put all triangles on one side and all squares on one side. Now, the triangles and the squares that you have might be different size. Some might be big, some small, some what, but as long as it is a square, you put it in that box. As long as it is a triangle, you put it in that box. That is how you'll help your learners to master these form constancies. That it is all about the form, how it is, the shape of the object, how it is shaped, and so on. And then their signs should be developed and applied to the ability to distinguish numbers from alphabetic letters. So you can have even these cut out numbers in alphabetic letter, and you say, please put all the numbers on this side and all the alphabetic letters this side. So the learners must go into the box, take out all the numbers, take out all the alphabetic numbers or letters, and then put them in one box, and that is how they will sort out these two things from one another. And then they can know that the E, it belongs to alphabetic letter, but the 3 belongs to numbers. So you can help them to develop or to master these type of things. Develop haptic activity. Now, what is haptic activity? Where learners use their sense of touch and feel to identify objects. Now, haptic activities is one very interesting activity that you can have with your learners. You can have objects in a box, and then you blindfold all your learners, or maybe one by one. You can blindfold them with a cloth, and you help them to feel these objects with their hands, and when they see that the object is round, they put it this side. If they see that the object is squared or what, they put it this side. If they see that the object is sharp, they put it on the other side. So you can help them, this can help them to identify these objects without seeing them. They just feel. Or you can tell them, put all the soft object on one side and all the hard object on this side. Or put all the objects that are wet on this side, the object that feel wet or dry to this side. Now, those are the type of things that you can use to teach your learner to develop this haptic activity, which is a very, very interesting game, and learners like this type of games. Develop visual activities where learners use their sense of sight to identify objects. Visual activities. So in other words, the learners must be able to see the object and identify the object. They just look at the object and say, no, this one is round, it must be in this box. This one is squared, it must be in this box, and so on. Develop visual motor activity where learners use their sense of sight and motor coordination to identify objects, see the object and sort according to. In other words, they take the object, they move it according to what they think. This issue belongs to this group, and this one belongs to that group, and this one belongs to this group. So that is what they should be able to learn and to master. Now, in conclusion for this one, we are going to talk about students should teach learners to group objects according to the following things. You must teach them to group objects according to their color. In other words, as we were explaining earlier, you either put all the red ones, regardless of the shapes, regardless of the size, regardless of how big they are, you just put all the colors one box. And then you can also either ask them to identify or classify object according to shape. In other words, they just look at the shape. If the shape is the same, regardless of the color. And this is the critical point where you have to teach them that don't concentrate on the color, just concentrate on the shape. So it can be all yellow, red, a lot of yellow and so on, but we are only concentrating on the shape this time. If the object is round, you put it in this box. If the object is what, you put it in that box. And the next one is also size. They don't now concentrate on the color, they don't concentrate on the shape, but they concentrate on the size. So what is the size of the object? All those objects with a similar size, you put them in one box, regardless of the shape, regardless of the color. And another one is also that we discussed is that you can ask them also, the same objects, they must now classify them according to the materials. So you ignore the color, whether there are 3 yellows there and 5 red ones there, it's not a problem. You disregard the shape, you disregard the size, and you look at the materials. When you talk about materials, so that means that you put all the glasses together, all the wooden object together, all the metal object together, and all the plastic objects together. That is when we talk about materials. Or you can sort it out according to patterns. Now, when you talk about patterns, is these ones that we're talking about, whether they are zigzag, whether they are dot, 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 or circles, or what, the patterns that you see. The pattern is a repetitive action of how the thing is made or how the thing look like. Some of them are having a certain pattern. And then the texture, we talk about how it feels, whether it feels rough, whether it feels smooth, whether it feels wet, feels dry. So when you talk about texture, it's more about you teach your learners to say that, okay, let's all look at this object, but we must only look at the texture. In other words, how does it feel? Is it a rough object? Is it a soft object? Is it a wet or dry object, hot or warm, whatever the texture is that you want to teach your learner that day. And then the function, very critical that you must also learn how to teach your learners the functions of object. Some of the objects are used in the garage. So if I have a spanner there, a screwdriver and a plier, the learner must immediately know that these ones are used in the garage to fix the car or to fix these technical things, unscrew a screw or whatever. But their function is more about technical things. Or when you see a knife and a fork, the learner must be able to see that, no, this one are used for kitchen. They are cutleries. So whether they are used to cut or whether they are used to peel off or to eat or to do any other function or to cook and so on, they must know that those things are made for the kitchen. And association, also we talk about association, that you associate things that are doing similar things. And also we talk about the class names. We talk about in which class these objects are classified. And then we also talk about common features, that things that are having a lot of things in common or that are having similar things in common. Then we talk about common features. High level of classification, we talk about multiplication. The same object can be grouped in many different ways. Multiple classification is the same object can be grouped in many different ways. Class classification, we talk about different objects can be grouped into a class in classes like food, clothes, or homes. And then we talk about hierarchical classification. There can be classes in class. Like a transport, there can be cars, trucks, boats. And in cars, there can be red cars, blue cars, or white cars. So hierarchical classification is actually in class classification. Hierarchical classification refers to in that group. Although you have that group, for example, you can either take an example of a classroom. Although those learners are in one classroom, there are boys and girls. And in the girls, there are short and tall girls. There are thin and fat girls. There are girls that come from this location and there are girls that come from that location. Or you can say there are girls that speak this language and there are girls that speak the other language. So now we have hierarchical classification. For example, one example that they are giving here, for example, transport. When we talk about transport, you can be transported in a bus or in a small car or in a buggy. They are all cars, but the bus is different from a small car. But in the buses, there are yellow buses, there are red buses, there are white buses, there are white buses. And the same with the cars. There are red cars, there are big cars, there are small cars, and so on. So those are the things that you need to learn the students so that they can know what is the difference between hierarchical classification and class classification and multiple classification. Please learn how to differentiate these three words, because multiple classification, class classification, hierarchical classification are not the same thing. They are different, and you need to know to give these definitions, especially when you come to assignments and examination. They will ask you to give each one an example. So when we say that multiple classification, give an example, or give an activity, or write a lesson plan that will teach learners multiple classification, then you must be able to know. When they give an activity that will teach class classification, then you must know that different objects can be grouped in a class like food. And then you can have an activity that talks about food, and that talk about clothes, and that talk about, for example, cars. And then you know that the learner must be able to classify these things. And then forms constancy in shape, we say, means that the shape stays the same even when there are some minor changes like size, color, and pattern. The shape remains the same. So you have different people, they are all people. Some are thin, some are fat, some are tall, some are black, some are white, some are what, but they are all people. In other words, they are having different, they have the same form, but they are different in other things like the size, like the color, or how tall they are, how short they are, and so on. But they are all people. So that means that they fall in the same category of human beings. The learners need both haptic and visual experience to learn to discriminate between shapes. So it's very, very important that you need to teach your learners the haptic visual experience, the haptic experience and the visual experience. There is a difference between the two, and you need to know the difference for you to be able to convey this to the learners. And then it's very critical that you must look into your prescribed book. There is the Pidgeot described 4 stages of cognitive development. These 4 stages, you must know what is the years that they are taking place, from which year to what year in the growth of a learner. And then you must also know, for example, what is happening during that year. For example, sensory. What is happening during sensory motor stage? What is the year attached to sensory motor stage? Pre-operational. What is the years attached to that? From what year to what year? Concrete and formal operational level. You need also to know the year, and you must also know what is happening during that year, because if you don't know this, then it will become difficult for you to be able to answer or to understand learners. The whole reason of Pidgeot is the psychology that he have developed is for us to be able to understand learners, so that you can know at what year are your learners and what is the expected behavior. And this, as these are in your textbook and prescribed book, they are all stated there. What is the year? What is the behavior? How will the learner behave when it is at this year? And what is it that you need to do as a teacher to meet his needs, so that you can be able to help this learner to understand things and to master concept and so on. So that's why we are talking about the 4 stages. And then the other one is pre-operational, the other one is concrete, and the other one is formal operational levels. Those 3 levels of Pidgeot, very, very critical that you must understand it. Thank you.